That was perfect timing. Welcome to Ask the Doctor. It is Tuesday here in the United States. I know that we have guests that come in from a variety of places, so I'm always cautious to say good evening. It might be morning somewhere else. But I'm Jeanette Chambers. I welcome you. I'm your co-host this evening with Dr. Carolyn Hoffman, and it's always a pleasure, and we seem to have a lot of fun whenever we do this together. So we're happy that you're here and that your guests are here to learn more about this incredible technology called ASEA. It's a redox signaling supplement. And that's a lot of words for a science that most people are just beginning to wrap their head around. So let me just say that maybe 10, 11 years ago, I was sitting in your shoes at that time. I had no idea what this was when my friend introduced it to me. But there was a significant challenge that my son was facing. And as you heard in this video, as this woman was facing, there's something that draws you to ASEA, why you find it. And it worked for my son. He had shattered his ankle and it healed in a third of the time, and we were just tickled pink that. And then I began to realize there's so many ways that this could help me and the rest of my family. So you may be here for someone that you care about. You may be here for yourself. You may be here because you're looking to be proactive about your health. You may be here because you want to make sure that the years you have left are filled with longevity and a really good quality of life. You could be here because you're an athlete and you want a better performance rate. You might be a weekend athlete. That's okay. I am. You might be here for any of the anti-aging benefits that we have, whether it be less of the wrinkles that show on your face or just more muscle tone, whatever it might be. You may even be here because you heard that there's an amazing business that goes with this product while we make a difference. And there's so many reasons, and Dr. Hoffman's going to address many of those this evening. For those of you that are just joining, I would like to reiterate what Ellen Noble said in the video. We are not a treatment or a cure for any condition or illness. So as you listen here tonight, what you're going to hear about is an amazing technology that helps the body do what it's intended to do, heal. It allows you to just be the best. It optimizes your cellular health. And optimize is a really powerful word and sometimes used a lot in, I'm going to say like the media or in ads, but here it's truly what we are doing here with this product. And so as I ask Dr. Hoffman questions tonight, she's going to reveal some of the science behind it, what it is, maybe some of the expectations of what you can see when you begin on your journey with ASEA. And I invite all of you to stay open to what's possible here, how you might be able to share it with someone that you care about. We're here every Tuesday evening, and we welcome you to continue to bring your guests, come back here and learn. This is an educational seminar, and we're very proud of the fact that we work together. We all benefit from sharing this and helping other people understand the power that we have to have the body take care of itself. Dr. Hoffman is a naturopath. She sits on our medical board. She's very well read. One of the benefits of her sitting on the ASEA medical board, not only is it a voluntary position, but she has access to research that none of us even know about yet. And so she's always staying on top of this. And that's why I love hearing what she shares with you, because it's embedded with real science and her expertise. She's a digestive specialist. And it is such a privilege to call her a friend and know that we work in this mission together. So without further ado, it's a very brief introduction, but I'm going to let her speak for the majority of this evening on why you're here and what is ASEA. So Dr. Hoffman, welcome.
Thank you, Jeanette. I'm just going to pin the two of us together here and
Okay.
so that we can both be seen at the same time. And I will add that one. There we go, since we are going to have a conversation. So I think it's
Yes.
more fun than just looking at my face. But yeah, we want to welcome everyone, and I'm always glad that people take the time to learn about
Mhm.
this. I often will start by saying, that I did not take the time in 2011 when somebody first shared this with me. So I'm excited that people are here to
Yeah.
actually do what I didn't do originally.
Wow. Yeah, tell us a little bit about that. What happened there that there was this gap because now you're all in. Like something shifted for you, not only as a person, but in your own medical awareness.
Yes, as I say, someone offered me the opportunity to learn about this in 2011. Like so many of us, I think, or certainly people that we've all tried to share with, we aren't all open at the right moment when we learn of when we get this offer to educate ourselves, and so sometimes we don't take that opportunity. I didn't. I was working in a different field that was really consuming my attention, and back then I will say that we really didn't have a lot of the science to back up this breakthrough that we had, even though we were
Yeah.
seeing things happen. And so there wasn't a lot that someone could share with me, and so I kind of just passed on this. I was very fortunate that someone else came across my path, but it wasn't until 2017 that I had a second chance. I nearly missed it a second time. Um, and I really have to say that probably I might not have actually taken a deeper look at it if we hadn't by this time actually had the white gel, the Renew 28. And
Mhm.
the person who invited me to learn about it gave me one of the little travel tubes and some instructions on using this. And my husband gave me the opportunity to see how it worked because he went and injured himself and he was in a lot of discomfort. And I said, when I remembered that I got it, I was like, oh, I've got this thing that, I was told can help with discomfort. Let's try it. You can be my guinea pig. And any of us who know that, we've been using that technology, the same as in the liquid that we're going to talk about, but, for the topical application, so I followed those instructions. He got a benefit, and that was what made me decide to learn more. So then I went to a live event that happened to be coming in my town with Dr. Silverman, and I got to watch him put that gel on lots of other people and see the same kinds of benefits for discomfort. And he has some pretty amazing outcomes. And so it caught my attention. And I decided that, well, I've watched this work on a lot of people here. Let's go see if it actually does the same thing for my clients. So I ordered some of the gel and I ordered a couple of cases of the liquid. I can't say I was actually ready to do much with the liquid at that point.
Mhm.
But in those days, you couldn't kind of separate the orders out like now. We can, customize our orders
Yeah.
beautifully. And so I got some gel and just ran my own test case, really like we suggest now with our newer application of the Redox Gold, which we'll talk about. We talk about going and testing that on 10 people so that you can begin to see the variety of experiences that people have and how quickly the body loves to receive some additional support
Yeah.
from Redox. But I did this with the white gel, put it on everybody that came in the office who had something that hurt and just said, I'm trying out a new product. Can I test it and can you give me some feedback? And so that continued to prove to me that I had something very unique, because it really didn't matter whether it was someone with a hip challenge that was a level 8 discomfort. That was actually my first experience. It went to a 0 in under 5 minutes, and I was like completely
Oh my
flustered with
gosh.
what to do with that. And then, I had people who had sinus challenges that were like a 7, in like 10 minutes, it would move down to a 3, which is demonstrating that the body's doing something. It doesn't mean that everybody goes to a 0 in 10 minutes, but I was just trying to see what kind of results, whether it was severe headache, the kind of thing where people are taking medication and they might want to put themselves in the dark because that, causes them a lot of discomfort. That was like a 9 to a 2 in about 10 minutes. And I had someone who had a broken toe, very bruised and a lot of discomfort, had an appointment the following day for their own GP. And so I said, well, let's try this. We put the gel on and I gave them the rest to take home. And they called me the following day and said, well, my toe is virtually not blue anymore. And this is in one day, and I don't have any more discomfort. So, I've canceled my appointment with a doctor. So this was kind of my entree into this, realizing that there was an interesting application with one technology that could have influenced all sorts of different things and very different approach. And then I kind of stepped into the liquid. I think a lot of naturopaths will tell you that their family are their guinea pigs. And
Yeah.
my husband had been struggling with being able to exercise and breathe adequately over 22 years, had a lot of breathing equipment and backup nebulizers and oxygen tanks and things like that. And in that 22 years, we had tried everything that I had researched. I mean, literally everything. We
And
could
I
take.
believe that because you're well read. I mean, you really
Right.
were
I mean,
looking.
that was partly why I didn't pay attention to a seer in the beginning because I was deep into one thing that I thought was going to be the solution.
Mhm.
Um, I could get a little bit of benefit for him, but I could never get him off all of those things. And the kicker for me was when I gave this to him, not with really any dramatic expectation, but just like,
Mhm.
well, try it. You never know. I'm listening to lots of experiences that people seem to get. So, what have you got to lose, right? It's totally non-toxic. Can't be allergic to it because we're actually manufacturing exactly the same signaling messengers in the body.
Yeah.
And is also transparent to medication, which is really rare that you can give something that safely will not interfere with anyone's meds. And so it was like, there's no downside, right? It's only benefit, can't hurt, can only help. But within 2 weeks, we went from someone who had two inhalers, oxygen tanks, and nebulizers. And, over every year, we'd probably have about three or four 911s, and sometimes would end up being admitted to the hospital when we couldn't control it. And in 2 weeks, he went from someone who was struggling with those things, who might even need an inhaler if you walked up a flight of stairs, to being able to get out in the garden and actually work vigorously for 8 hours, climb trees, cut down trees, do all sorts of things, and without
Wow.
without using his inhaler once. And at the end of that day, it was like, okay, what the heck have I got my hands on here? I needed to know, why did this work differently than everything else that we tried?
So you had so many opportunities to see how quickly it worked. I mean, that's probably one of the first things I heard you say was how fast. Even if you have a migraine, it can take hours before it goes away, right?
Mhm.
But this was helping in so many situations and quickly, but yet it was still your husband's experience that really said, okay, enough. I think I get it. Like I have to be a part of this and understand more. So when you began to look at it, how would you explain to our audience tonight what is it that was working so well? What is redox signaling molecules?
Right. And we often like to say, what is it not? And I think that
Yeah.
that's an important thing because we are mostly in the space. I think most of us are in the space where we're very used to the physical supplements, something that comes in a pill or a capsule. Maybe it's an essential oil you might be using, or it's CBD or some exotic juice, or some kind of activated water. There are many roads that support the body to finding its way back to healing.
Mhm.
But this is different. It is none of those. It is not a physical material. We're actually in the space of biochemistry. But don't
Yeah.
get crazy, because I felt the same when I started reading the books. It's like, what is this? Trying to wrap my brain around it because it's a very different approach. I often
Oh,
think this feels like Starship, Enterprise, that we actually are
yeah.
breaking through the final frontier, because what we're coming down to is the fact that as human beings, we're made of 70 to 100 trillion cells, and each of those cells form units like we do all over the world, our communities, right? And they create the tissues and then the organ systems of the human body. And so what we're working in is this space that if every cell is communicating clearly, which it's designed to do, This is, as we talk about, the operating system of cellular communication, which maintains and ensures that our body can do the thing that it's designed to do, which is to heal. And in that process, this system is supposed to go out and find when we've got a damaged cell, right? Locate it, help the body to repair it, to replace old and damaged cells with nice new healthy ones, maintain our genetic expression, make sure our DNA replication happens, all these incredible things that really amount to the fact that can we stay healthy when we've got a challenge? Does the body know how to resolve them? And the cells do it through this communication system. It's a language, really. It's how the cells talk, how they talk within themselves to maintain health, and how they network, just like our cell phone system and our Wi-Fi systems, they network to communicate across all our cells. All these amazing messages kind of flicking on switches on and off to make everything happen. That is simply healing, right? Our bodies are designed to heal. We're not designed to promote sickness. And this redox signaling system is the language of how cells speak to maintain health. In other words, address a problem, resolve it, help us heal internally, and restore balance again. And as long as our body's doing that efficiently, we don't have chronic diseases. But over time, one of the things that we've learned scientifically is that, we're born with like a complete bevy of these signaling messengers. They are, on high power alert system. If you think back to children, right, they're super energetic. They look amazing. Their skin's incredible, right? They heal really quickly. They recover really fast. If they fall over, they don't break their hips like we do when we get older and things like that. And what's happening is that from puberty, which is really pretty early, I don't think we ever think that that's actually where aging is already starting, right? Who's 10 to 15 and thinking, gosh, I'm getting old, right? That doesn't happen, right? We're going to push that down the line for much later. But actually, that's when the clock starts ticking. We begin to lose 1% of these essential cell signaling systems per year. So every year we're on the planet, we're going to be less efficient at healing than we were the year before. And as that progresses, science is very well documented nowadays to know that, this redox signaling system changes as we get older, that it is literally the redox balance, the ability to detect a problem and respond and help us heal is essential for health. And that the longer we're out of balance, which is going to happen, the longer we're on the planet, right, the more diseases we will inevitably have because the body isn't working as efficiently. I like to think of them as a bit like a 911 call, right? When we've got a damaged cell somewhere, the oxidant, this is where redox comes from, reductants and oxidants, these little signals at the end of the Krebs cycle and ATP production. They call up, the reductant piece, which is the antioxidant healing mechanism. And as long as we can send enough fire and crew rescue for every call, we're in good shape. But as time moves on, there are too many 911 calls and not enough fire and rescue to meet the problems.
Yeah, and that really is the essence of why we want to continue being consistent with the product so that you don't overwhelm the resources to answer the 911, right? You want more workers than you want 911 calls.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really the interest of everyone's best. You don't have to chase the ambulances, right?
Yeah, it's exactly right. And that's effectively what they are. So, I mean, this product that we haven't kind of talked about in terms of stabilization, we didn't discover redox, right? This is an inbuilt process of being a human being. This is God's design for health and combating aging and disease and inflammation. It's an inbuilt process. The scary thing is that when we stop making it, we're dead in about 3 seconds. That's how essential it is. We can actually hold our breath longer than we can exist without a redox signal. So that should kind of hint at how fundamental and how important it is because it plays in the space of every single cell. And
Yeah.
here we have a technology that came out of about 10 years of publicly traded research, banked off of 6 Nobel Prizes, in how do you take
Mhm.
these very highly volatile molecules that are in our system and do what everybody said scientifically wasn't possible, that you can't stabilize something that's really a very fleeting process outside the
Mhm.
human body and do anything that could be valuable. And so there was a different company that was doing this publicly traded research. They were looking at going the drug route originally. And they could make them, but they would only hang around for 10 minutes. Well, there's not much you can do with something that only lasts 10 minutes. And so the
Yeah.
scientific breakthrough that ASEA has is that we worked with scientists to discover how to actually stabilize them outside the human body for what was initially a 12-month lifespan. Our science has progressed dramatically over that time, and now, what we have in the bottle is active for at least 21 months. And so what that means is, to your point, Jeanette, is if we know that aging is an absolute automatic process, and with it is this loss of redox, which is the thing that ensures our body can keep us healthy, recovering quickly, super vibrant, resistant as much as we can be to diseases and chronic challenges. This is a beautiful way to say, as that drops down in our glass, as we kind of think of it as being up there when we're young
Mhm.
and diminishing with time, we can really basically refill our glass and elevate our quantity, really power up our redox potential. And as a
Yeah.
result of it, the one thing that we do see is we can globally help any cell in the body to reset its ability to really get to task with whatever's going on. So this is why we're not targeting and focusing on specific things, but looking at the overall health. And, we can combat that loss, which really kind of
Yeah.
puts a stake in interrupting this natural breakdown of aging and increase of inflammation and chronic disease, but with something that is totally non-toxic and it's not a drug and can only help us. It certainly can't harm us, which is really amazing. And anyone like yourself, you've been on it longer than I have.
Yeah.
We'll notice, right, the longer we're on it, especially when we do the photo comparison over time, right, we really begin to see those kind of reversal and slowing down of that aging process. And we'll all often say we feel at least 10 or 20 years younger than we used to when we're on it
Oh,
now.
yeah. My favorite is when my doctor says, "Well, at your age, your blood work should be much worse." I go, "What do you mean, my age?"
Yeah,
So
right.
they're always so impressed with my blood work and my physical, and it's just she said at your age I'd never see this. This is really amazing. I am perfect. I'm right in the middle of every blood test, right? And so I've been on this for 11 years. Very happy about that. But you said a couple things. One, you were talking about how we were, people are we're interrupting our aging process. I think we're interrupting also our mindset, our belief system of what is aging. Like, how do we age and how this product helps us, have a continuity in our aging process that maybe breaks up those beliefs. Isn't that part of it? Because we're used to this medical um, environment where you got to take a pill or you got to do something. And then if we're already in that, this is the second part of my question. How does this product work with someone who's already maybe taking medications for something that they're dealing with?
Yeah, and that's a beautiful question, right? I mean, I think in functional medicine and the space of natural health, so many people come on meds and they don't want to be on the meds. They want to try to get off them. So we've got to really support the system to be able to pick up the slack and do what it's lost control over, right? Because you wouldn't be on a medication if your body was doing what it did. And there's probably at some point when you didn't need a medication, but that change is slowly progressing downhill. What I love, as I mentioned at the beginning, is the fact that we can add this in and it is transparent to medication. What does that really mean? What that means is if
Mhm.
you're on a medication, you can safely add this into your protocol. Don't change anything that you're doing. You certainly don't come off your meds. That's not our job to tell you to do that. You need to work with your own doctor. But benchmark everything about your health. And we have a great benchmarking form, but benchmark everything about your health. Start engaging in using this on a daily basis and then track the changes. What we see is, aging is a lot to do with an overabundant increase of inflammation, and redox is the control switch for that. I mean, this is part of what signals the response to deal with inflammation and create something called glutathione, which is our master antioxidant, which helps put out the fire of inflammation. So it's right at the heart of that whole thing. And if we look scientifically, we know that there's this whole science of what we call senescent cells, aging cells, that should hear the signal that there's a time for them to move on, right, and be replaced by a new healthy cell. But we know scientifically, that they've been looking at this for at least like 8 to 10 years now, that these cells hang around and they don't listen to the fact that they're told to go away and be replaced. And then they become these bad actors. They go around and recruit other cells. And what this does is promotes more and more inflammation. So I think what we're doing here by elevating the quantity of redox, by bringing up our redox potential, by helping amplify signaling between the cells so that they can search and rescue more effectively. We're providing more resources to the body to deal with those challenges. And so we do see the slowdown. And what people will often see is maybe, they're on blood pressure medication and they start this, and time goes on as you rebuild the redox on a daily basis, the body starts to pick up some of those things lost. And so you start to see changes, and we want to track the changes. And if people see that maybe they get some symptoms of like low blood pressure, that's probably a signal that their body's doing some of the work itself, and maybe you don't need as much medication. And we frequently will see people come back and tell us, well, I'm no longer on my blood pressure medication because my body's doing really well on its own again. Maybe it could be blood sugar medication. That's something, people will be able to track and make changes with. So the cool piece is, we're really just helping the body go back to a space where it had the ability to do what it knew how to do much better.
Yeah. Well, in that, in the beginning you were talking about how quickly people were getting a response. So now you have some people who maybe have had a condition and now they're starting to layer in ASEA as an option to better their health and optimize how they heal. What kind of expectations can they have? And what is it that optimizes their use of ASEA, like the water or things? What are some of the parameters around how people really should utilize this?
Right. Starting with the gel, I mean, the gel is beautiful for being able to get an experience quickly of how the body will take up those signals. The Redox Gold is our latest development. It's been on the market for about a year now, but this is a 4-year study out of University of Western Australia and Bath University in England in helping us target that inflammatory signaling genetic pathway. And so this is a really unique gel that if you've got something, this is a brand new one, so I haven't opened it, but if you've got something that's hurting, we say measure, that level of discomfort from a 0 to a 1 to a 10, and then apply the gel and then track how quickly your body will actually see a response. It's targeted, and so we see these very quick responses where mostly, probably 9 out of 10 people are going to see something in maybe as quickly as 3 minutes, which is really astounding. If you don't see something shift in 3 minutes, just apply one more application and wait, maybe 10 minutes. This picks up on supporting the body's ability to deal with that discomfort immediately, but not just relief, but also triggering long-term healing. So the more you use it, the more you're supporting the body in doing its own repair process. So people can feel with the gels how quickly the body makes changes and says, thanks very much for some extra redox. I'm going to direct it here. But I like to think of this as really more like a fire extinguisher, right? Where you've got a problem, we're going to target that problem and we're going to help it on site. When we work with the liquid, it's different. We often call this broad spectrum. And this is because this is going to support all the cells in the body. It's not targeted in the way that this would be, because this is just hitting that inflammatory genetic pathway. And so when we support the body and we rebuild the redox potential, we're going to see different patterns of response. And that's why we love to have the benchmark, where we benchmark everything about your health, not just the main thing that you're focusing on.
Yeah.
Because we got to see what's the body deciding it's going to do with this additional redox. And it may decide it has a slightly different priority than we have, right? We might have those
Yeah.
creaky knees, and that's where this is good for the outside. But if we're trying to change the pattern of what caused those creaky knees from the inside, this is the thing that we're going to want to rebuild. Now, those
Yeah.
creaky knees may take about 2 months before they start to demonstrate what it's been doing with that liquid. But maybe it improves someone's sleep in the first week, right? They might see sharper mental acuity. Maybe they have more energy and, they don't need the cup of coffee at 10 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the day.
Yeah.
Or they can stay awake and watch their favorite program in the evening without falling asleep by 7 o'clock. Or maybe they've got some extra energy to go play pickleball or play with their grandchildren. I mean, all of those things. We know we get 29% increase in endurance and recovery with the liquid. But what we do know is when you drink about 4 ounces a day at the beginning in that first week, only 15% of people are likely to see something change. Doesn't mean it's not working. It is working. We know that clinically.
Yeah.
But most people aren't going to see that. So that leaves like 85% of us waiting to see what happens. We often will say, increase the quantity. That's also a great way to kind of move things along. But we do know that if you keep consistently using it, about 50% of people are really getting excited about what they're seeing at the end of the first month. But the biggest shifts come at 90 days, when we know that 90% of people have made those changes. Although we have some new research, which is really interesting, which we are concluding and will be published fairly shortly. We've been tracking what we call cytokine markers. These are things in our blood work that demonstrate inflammation. And those particular inflammatory markers, whilst we see changes in the first 60 days, it begins to downregulate. The biggest shift happens from 60 to 120 days in our 4-month study. So the longer you're on it, the more you're going to see improvements. And that reduces inflammation, changes the glutathione, and does all these incredible things. So we just say track your changes, because you're going to know what the body's doing with it. And time and quantity are the two things that are the variables for each person. Everyone's going to have a unique journey based around your genetics, what your lifestyle's like, your age, what are you doing? How long have you had a challenge? And then quantity is the other thing. In a sense, like the quicker you can refill the empty glass, the more resources you have and the faster your body seems to respond and be able to demonstrate what it's doing. And then when you get to wherever is good, play around with that quantity, find what's perfect for you, because we all find that, we vary very much on what is perfect to keep us optimally healthy.
But we do need to make sure we're drinking regular water, not just ASEA, right? I mean, because you want to keep flushing this out, right?
Yes, absolutely. ASEA starts with saline, which is often a confusing thing for people when they look at labels and they say, well, it's just salt water. No, it's not. And in fact, actually, I can show, let me just share a screen here, and let's get rid of that one for a second. Let me actually show you some of the site here. So here is the actual FDA registered facility that we have. And this is the tanks that our process goes through. When we first started making it back in 2009, it would take us about 3.5 days to actually take the saline and break it apart in the same way that the human body does. So we go through this process of this pristine saline. We break it apart in the same way that our mitochondria is doing it. So we take the 4 components of salt water and we break it apart in the same way that the cells are doing. And then we restructure it into these stabilized redox signaling molecules. And this is here is how it goes through the different stages. This is a patented process. We have about 1,000 trade secrets on what we do, and this is the only facility in the world where we manufacture this. And from here, we actually supply direct to the door of every consumer in 35 countries in the world. And so it's not saline, it starts off that way. But in the process of the making of it, there's really very little saline left. It's just stabilized redox signaling molecules. And you'll see on our bottles, you'll see testing. This is third-party labels here. Every fourth batch is independently tested by specialist laboratories in Spain and in Germany to validate that what we're purchasing is stabilized redox signaling molecules. It's not salt water, which is a lot
Yeah.
miscommunication that people have if they go Google things instead of actually do some real research.
But I always find that fascinating because we're not obligated to do any of that. And
No.
yet we do, right? We're not regulated by the FDA for a reason. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I know we didn't talk
Yeah.
about this before, but I think that's a very important distinction to make. I have my own views on it, but I want the audience to hear what is that when we're in an FDA regulated facility,
Facility, yes.
but we are
Uh,
not an FDA regulated product. Can you talk a
right.
little bit about that?
Right. And that's always a misnomer when people say to me on any product, whether it's even something that comes in a capsule, I go, well, is it FDA approved? There are no supplements that are FDA approved, right? The FDA approves drugs, right? And why do they approve drugs? Well, because every drug has toxicity levels to it. Every drug has to establish something called an LD50, which means lethal dose 50, which means that those animals that they're using to test on these initial tests, they take those animals, they feed them quantities of the drug that they're working towards, they keep increasing it until 50% of those animals die. That establishes the LD, the lethal dose 50. Now, every drug has an LD50. It can't become a drug if it doesn't have an LD50, which is also kind of interesting about us, right? And so that means that every drug has a level of toxicity. You can overdose on every drug, you can kill yourself on every drug, same as aspirin, right? All of these things. The body's not designed to just take in quantities because they are all poisons to one extent or another. So the FDA doesn't regulate nutritionals because there aren't the LD50s around it. One of the things that's kind of interesting about ours was originally when they were going towards the drug route, we went through all these processes, and in the process of trying to establish an LD50 for what's in this bottle, it was not possible. And in other words, there is no lethal dose to this. Everyone actually got healthy. That was one of the tricky parts why they couldn't continue with the drug route, was that all the animals got healthy and they were trying to study for HIV and cardiovascular health and diabetes. And this was the previous company that had the initial 10 years of research that we purchased and developed from there. So that's why we know from our clinical studies that there's no toxicity in what we have.
Yeah, which is really amazing given the amount of work that you've done in your specialty for digestive issues and just the patient population you've had. That must have just blown your mind that that was
Yeah.
actually possible.
Yeah, I mean, I love this because it is the only thing in 25 years that I can safely give to anybody if they're on a medication and not be concerned that it's going to interfere with what they're doing. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got, access to hundreds of different products, really good products, but no matter how good the materials are, the physical materials, which will all be listed on the label, which is why
Right.
it's confusing because no one has a category for redox worldwide. And so we're put in this same category as physical material, which is why we have to say that we have water and salt here when there's
Oh, yeah.
really very little salt. I mean, if you're on a sodium restricted diet, you can take this because it's got about the same salt as a slice of bread on a daily consumption. So there's no one
But
who can't eat.
in the whole bottle, right?
No, per
Like
four ounces is kind
per
of the
four
equivalent.
ounces.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
We can have people on that who are on sodium restricted diets. But to come to these things, you can have the most top quality products that are
Mhm.
made to really good standards. That does not mean that it's good for everyone because physical materials don't work for every single human being. We are all very bio-individual. And so you can have a great product and it may cause someone a discomfort in their stomach and it be fine for somebody else,
Mhm.
or it creates a rash for someone. So there's nothing that I've got in a capsule form that I can safely give to somebody also if they're on meds without looking at cross interactions. It's why
Yeah.
doctors are always wanting to know your lists of what you're taking if you're going in for hospitals and operations because there's interaction with those medications. So this is a beautiful thing that whether you've got someone who's got rampant cell dividing challenges and they're in for traditional treatments, in hospitals, I can help somebody with this and buffer because of the cytoprotection, because of the ability to protect healthy cells and not interfere with the fact that a drug will go search for a bad cell. I can help support people through those really rigorous programs where fatigue is a real challenge, with them, nausea is a real challenge,
Yeah.
nerve damage is a real challenge, losing their hair is a real challenge. And we see the most amazing journeys for people with much better outcomes. So, I can't do that with other supplements in the same way, and it's a really unusual development in being able to support everybody, regardless of what their challenge is.
Well, and that you make a really good point because people do go to a drug and say, "Oh, this will help one thing."
Mhm.
And then someone will say, "Well, is it really going to help me?" And what I just heard you say was, yes, because the way ASEA works is it helps all of our cells,
Right.
right? Is that what I heard you say? Is that it's
Yeah.
not modality specific?
Right. So we have to know this is not going to, this is not diagnosing, treating, and curing.
No.
All this is doing is upregulating and rebuilding the innate capacity of the cells to communicate and to ensure that we can maintain health. And so the
Yeah.
beauty is that it doesn't matter where those damaged cells are. Like my husband obviously had damaged lung cells, otherwise he would have been able to breathe, right? But you may have damaged heart cells and you're on some heart medication. You may have some damaged bone cells because you've got, fragile bones or bones that are expanding and are all gnarly and all of those kinds of things. They're all examples of cells that are out of balance and the signal to heal is not happening efficiently and correctly. Otherwise, we wouldn't have those problems. Young children don't have them. When we're younger, we don't have them. I mean, if they do, they've got some problems going on. But by and large, all of those things are things we see as we progress. And with that is this loss of redox that is the control switch for healing.
Yeah. And it really is. I think that when I first started hearing about this, and I'm specifically wanting to talk to the person who's here for the first time or just starting on their ASEA journey and maybe haven't seen a lot yet. I just remember trusting the person who introduced it to me and looking at my benchmark, because you mentioned that a couple times. The benchmark is key. And for those of you listening, if you don't have one, please ask the person who invited you to the call to get the benchmark
Yeah.
because I needed help with. I was in my early 50s at the time, and I was going through a lot of change of life that women go through, and I had every issue happening and didn't know what it was. And my primary care doctor, he just wanted to give me a pill for everything, help me sleep and help me feel better and help my mood and help me
Right.
do that. I said, no, I'm not doing that. But I had the achiness that Carolyn's referencing. Genetically, that's in my family. Every woman, as they entered into their 70s and 80s, were crippled with this stiffness and achiness. I did not want that. So I was looking ahead and I started taking it for that. But to your point, Carolyn, what I noticed was within a week, my skin was so hydrated and it was so soft. I didn't
Right.
anticipate that. I was sleeping like a baby within a couple weeks. I did not anticipate that. Remember, I took it for my stiffness and my achiness. I wasn't, if I didn't have this benchmark form, I wouldn't have been paying attention to some of the other things that were going on. And I'm so grateful for that piece because of what you're saying. And
Right.
want to pay attention to that, right?
Right. And that's why we say start on day one, benchmark everything, all the things that you were mentioning, like energy, how you sleep, focus, mood, neurological, digestive, eye issues, breathing,
Yeah.
weight, if that's something you want to track, blood sugar, if that's an issue you have, blood pressure, sex drive, discomfort, stress levels, endurance, stamina. And if you're an athlete, it's wonderful. We have Olympic athletes on this, and you're much more in tune to really specific numbers, so you can really track those changes as you use it. And then, as we said, at day 7, retrack. And see, where are you starting to see changes? Maybe it's the eyes that have improved, perhaps it's the energy, but it's not, maybe the neurological is something that's a little later, and then day 30 and day
Mhm.
90. But tracking is, a beautiful way to be able to see what the body's doing with this for sure. One of
Yeah.
the other things that we can direct people to is that we do have, let me come out of this one for a second. I don't know how to get out of here. There we go. Let's go to Redox, discoverredox.com, for people who want to know more about the product. For example, if you'll look up here, we have, you can go to the athletes, there's also Redox Science. If you want to know more about the science, you can take a tour through the plant, and our former the president there will take you through, each of the stages and explain the science. But here's examples of all of the kinds of science that we've been
Mhm.
putting, millions of dollars of money over the years into this, because we are the first and only company to market, even though we've been here 15 years, that actually has done what we've done. Nobody else is able to replicate what we've got. They can't reverse engineer it. And we're still the only people. So we've had to invest to learn what we created,
Yeah.
and come to understand why we were seeing all these huge breadth of changes in health that don't make sense if you're so used to saying, as you said, Jeanette, right? I want something for my sleep, and I want something for my heart, and I want something for my stomach. It's like a thing for a thing, very symptom driven. And we see all of these variety of things change. And that's why people often say, well, how can one thing do all that? It's because we're working in every cell. And one of the things that I think is, this is all on our Renew 28, which is our anti-aging. If we come down to here, we have a study that is always worth looking at, the Torrent Labs gene study,
Mhm.
which is a double-blind placebo-controlled genetic study. This is loading a little slowly, which we did in 2017. And this, for me, showed me why I was seeing all these changes with my clients with digestive health issues. We had an 8-week study in which the group on the actual product took the product for 8 weeks, a placebo group that, did pure saline.
Yeah.
If you notice here, what we saw was that everybody on the ASEA Redox, there was 100% of them had these genetic pathway improvements, and the placebo was a 0%. That's outstanding. I mean, that does not happen in double-blind studies. And what we saw was changes in the immune system, vascular health, digestive enzyme signaling, hormone modulation, and this inflammatory pathway, which to me, when I looked at that, this is not even about being sick, right? If we want
Right.
real investment in long-term health insurance, this is where it sits, right? Because whether you've got a problem or whether you haven't got a problem, you darn well want to be supporting all these things to make sure that longevity without decline is, in your future. But I find this one
Mhm.
kind of interesting. The genetic pathways are like a doorway. They open multiple pathways, and you can see here things like serotonin, the mood regulation, neuroplasticity, being able to sleep really well, addressing antioxidant production in the body, blood vessel growth and repair. stem cells, for example. These are infertility pointers. Then we have inflammatory drivers, thyroid, insulin, sudden infant death syndrome is really kind of a fascinating one as being part of the inflammatory pathway, spinal
Mhm.
cord injuries. And we've seen some amazing outcomes for people with severe spinal cord injuries. And then you go to things like antiviral immune defense and looking at hormone signaling and metabolic strength. You know, this is just incredible to me. And this piece was after 8 weeks of being off the product, they went back and retested the genetic pathways of those healthy 35-year-olds who were our test subject. And their genetics, which were already downregulated before the study, had reset themselves to their less than optimal level, their baseline of where it was, which really kind of proved, that if we want to combat aging, this is, to me, this is up there with lifestyle, which means good sleep, good water, good food, right? Exercise, stress reduction, getting out in the
Yeah.
sunshine. It's up there with that. It's all part
Yeah.
and parcel of an everyday process.
Well, you said so many things there. We could be here for another couple hours. But I do want to highlight something because I'm not a researcher. So I didn't really understand all those numbers. I don't know how many people here really truly would understand all those numbers,
Right.
but 100% of people responding positively to anything in research is unheard of.
Mhm.
It's never that high. It's not even 50%. What
No.
I've learned from researchers is you're lucky if you get 20.
Right.
So you got 100%. Now, the other numbers that you showed there were their increases. It wasn't that only 20% responded. It was that 20, they had an increase in 20% or 30% or whatever it was.
Right.
But 100% of these participants responded. So when someone says to you, will this work for me? Yes. And as Dr. Hoffman was saying earlier, it's about quantity and time. It's always working. So keep that in mind as you're entertaining this thought or you want to share it with somebody that you really care about. It's always working and it's always going to work. It will never stop working. But you said something else earlier about taking, how impressed you were with how it could handle so many things. I kind of want to go back just for a minute in our last 10 minutes here, how this company actually got started, because Vertus Norton, who's our founder, he was just as surprised by how many people were getting responses, which isn't that one of the reasons or the reason why he didn't or couldn't sell out to the pharmaceutical industry? Like, why,
Yeah.
we were talking about trust. You're going to trust your friend, but why did your friend trust this company with their health? And I think a lot of it has to do with our very humble beginnings.
Yeah, I mean, it is an amazing story, and I would encourage people to go to discoverredox.com because you can access the ASEA Genesis story, and it's well worth listening to. Curtis Norton is a really unusual person. He's a titan of industry in terms of being a CEO, as a former VP of strategy for Kraft Foods, who had retired, was doing consulting, and had an opportunity to work with a biotech company in a really strange space that kind of positioned him as the perfect person to be invited with this publicly traded company that I mentioned had been doing 10 years of research. They were trying to take it to the drug route and running out of money. And they invited him on the board to see if they could raise money and keep them going. Long and short of the story was that he couldn't raise money for them. The parent company ended up kind of divesting of assets. But one of the things that had happened was that Vertis had been given one of these little machines. I think you may remember I mentioned that they were making these identical, same redox signaling molecules that had a 10-minute lifespan, and they generate them in a little machine. People would drink them, and this is why they could study them. Vertis had one of these machines. He got to experience and notice the health benefits of consuming the product. So he knew that they got something interesting. And when the company was ending up divesting of assets, being a businessman, he put together an investment group and they purchased from this publicly traded company the 10 years of all the patents and research that they had to that point. So he got to see already the
Yeah.
very varied impacts that this technology was happening on health. And then the goal was, however, to be like a business flip. They were just going to find a way to stabilize it with a lifespan of longer than 10 minutes so that it was more useful. They managed to do that. It had a lifespan of 12 months. And in that process, of course, they were going to find somebody to buy it, that technology. But what they did was that they said, well, it'd be kind of curious to see, would people drink this? What kind of benefits would they see? And so they put together a beta test group of about 40 people. And they just said, they've all had some health issues. I think about 7 of them were actually terminally ill. They've been told to go home and get their life in order. I mean, so that was pretty serious for those people. But they just said, come drink as much as you want of it, and, in a couple of months, give us some feedback. When they went back to them 2 months later, what they found was instead of having challenges, everybody was beginning to feel really good, and their life was turning around. And as a result of it, they thought of other friends and family who needed this product. And so, independent of the company, they were shipping this to their friends and family. In about 20 countries, they now had 135 people using it at the end of the 2 months. And people were really enjoying the benefits. And at the same time, biopharmaceutical came in to look at the technology with the idea of investing, and when they decided that they definitely got something really worthwhile, the offer to Verdis was, we want to make you an offer so big that you won't go anywhere else. But they said that there was a catch. And Verdis was like, well, what's the catch? And they said, well, you've got to shut it down. And his question was, well, shut what down? And they said, well, you have 135 people drinking this product. If you want the money, you're going to have to shut it down. And this meant that Verdis himself could not enjoy the product either. And he was kind of taken back. He said, well, that seems really pretty harsh. He said, some of these people's lives are beginning to turn around. They need that. I don't feel that morally I can take this away from them. And they were pretty abrupt, kind of very businesslike. They said, well, if you want the money, if you want to work with us, you've got to walk away. And this was an amazing moral dilemma. And we often talk about the fact that, how many people faced with the notion of legacy changing money. I mean, this was legacy money for generations that they would never have had to think about anything again. And he was wealthy already. It wasn't like he desperately needed it. He came to the decision that this was just something he couldn't ethically do. And he walked away from that, but now was left with this product and was like, well, what am I going to do with it? Because here you have a technology that's first to market. Nobody knows what redox is. You can't put it on the shelf. And his experience of bringing all these amazing, well-known products to market, he knew darn well he couldn't stick this blue bottle on the shelf where people would look at it and go, well, it's water and salt. Not understand what redox is, not understand what third-party validation is, not understand like now our genetic study on there. And it was like, well, what to do with it? And it took them about 2 years before they were able to decide that this was the way that they had to go through direct marketing, because we have a story and we need to educate people both about the breakthrough science, something that people don't understand, why it works differently than anything else that they're used to. And that sharing those stories, we tend to trust our friends more very often for good reason. Than necessarily the paid advertising that we get from, the pharmaceutical industry. And so we have this unique space of direct marketing, which is a very unusual place, but it's driven through an ethos, which I think you talk beautifully about Ubuntu, I am because we are, but also putting, their philosophy is to put people and principles before ego and economics based on the fact that they turn down this money. And so it's a very unusual company to be part of. And I think it's what makes it maybe a unicorn in the space of direct marketing. We're very different as a culture
Well,
and an
we are
ethos.
because we had the ethos, we had the mission,
Yes,
the product first,
yes,
and most don't do it that way,
right.
right?
Yeah,
And so that's the beauty of why we're in this space and what you talked about with the
right.
ethos and the ethics that have founded this company.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so
I think that's a conversation that is well worth the exploration. And I know Dr. Silverman and Daniel Matthews do that on a Saturday on this same number. So I would encourage you to come at 11 o'clock and, tune into that if you're kind of curious, like what does it take to partner? What does that look like to partner with us as a group? Because we create amazing friendships. I think that's what's been, is
yes,
equally as rewarding as the benefit that we see with the product for people.
yeah, yes. It is at the top of the hour, and it has been a really wonderful time to have heard everything you've shared, Dr. Hoffman. I just want to know that if there's anybody out there at all that has a question, I think we've done a really good job of answering most of them by answering or asking them beforehand.
Yeah,
But I want to just thank the people that came on, who spent their time and their energy and their attention with us tonight. I encourage you to continue to share it. For those of you who are guests, I encourage you to try it. You have everything to gain and nothing to lose. We have a fabulous 30-day money back guarantee. And that was what sold me. I thought, I get my money back if I don't like
right.
it. I can drink the whole case and I still get it back.
Yeah,
So not very many companies are that generous, and they really are. And I've seen it again and again, where they will make it right. And very few people actually that have ever ordered have ever returned it. So
right.
that speaks volumes because we're in 36 countries now, aren't we, Carolyn?
Yeah. And I would say, don't be a scientific study of one, because very often people
Yeah.
want to say, well, if it works on me. Um,
Yeah.
I would encourage you to do just what I did as well. It's like go put the gel. You've got a beautiful way to see, experience how quickly people's bodies respond to this. Go put it on
Yep.
people. Get them to give you feedback. Learn about the huge breadth of opportunity that you have to be able to support other people and give them the chance to maybe attend one of our calls and learn for themselves and ask their own questions. I think that's a really important thing to do.
Yeah. It's the beginning of the year. Make it a great one. Thank you
Absolutely.
again for your time. And thank you, Carolyn. It's
All
always a
right.
pleasure to do this with you.
Take care, everybody.